I'm so glad you clicked on this video because today I want to show you how to cook the perfect steak. Whether you're a chef, you are training a new cook in a restaurant, send them this video. If you're an avid home cook, if you're a dad, a mom, anybody and everybody applies to this video, okay? There's so much misinformation on the interwebs. Take my advice for it. I've been a chef for a long time, and all that being said, well, chef, how do you have the credentials to teach how to cook a steak? Well, I really learned how to cook steaks in a steakhouse, okay? I worked at a beautiful steakhouse back in Las Vegas. It was called Cut by Wolfgang Puck in the Palazzo. And listen, this restaurant was freaking busy and high velocity. And that grill station, I would say, is one of the busiest in the United States. And we cooked all types of steaks, okay? New York, ribeye, Wagyu, American Wagyu, Japanese Wagyu, you name it, we cooked it. Not only that, I worked at Oriel in Mandalay Bay. Plenty of steaks on the menu. Same thing, high velocity, 400 covers a night, okay? Mid-rare, medium, mid-well, well done, all of that. Furthermore, as I began to develop as a cook and a chef, I've managed teaching a lot of cooks on how to cook a steak properly. First things first, what steak are we using, chef? Well, I got this wonderful bone-in filet that comes from Marbled Meats here in Montana. To get the steak, what I want to do is I want to dry it off as best as possible. And how I was taught to season, and what this is really important, is you want to season high. That way it disperses evenly, okay? And don't go crazy on the salt, okay, guys? High, boom. And then, look, I know for me, it's super important. At the restaurant, we use steak seasoning. But here, I'm just going to use salt. And then, you know, you're more than welcome to add pepper at this point. I'm not going to. But you can add pepper. You can add whatever you want. And we're going to let this rest now. So this goes away. Next up, what you want to grab, use a little bit of butter. So I got a little butter here. And I also have some garlic. And super important for me, I'm leaving the husk on the garlic clove, only because from my experience, when you go to butter baste it or sear it, and if the garlic doesn't have the skin on it, it will burn. It's not maybe, it will. So I usually leave the husk or the shell on the garlic. Now, at this point, you could also grab thyme, you could grab, your oils, grab your saute pans, and then just get your mise en place ready. It's been about 10 minutes, but I just want to show you this steak here. You can see that moisture, that moisture on top of the surface from the salt. I always season before I'm ready to go, and then, you end up with the outside getting a little bit moisture, but, the salt penetrates. Now, here's the sacrilege part. You want to pat this dry. Just one more shot so we get a nice sear on this. Now, for oil, I know all you seed oil freaks out of there, but check this out. Use whatever you want as long as it has a high cooking point. Today, I feel like using this. This is an algae cooking oil. It was gifted to me. Chef Daniel Hume uses it at 11 Madison Park, so I realized that's good for me. So we start with our oil, not too much. I think a lot of people like deep frying the steak. Do not deep fry the steak, okay? Lay it in. And then don't touch it, leave it alone. Now, if you notice, there's a big bone here, okay? So I'm gonna show you how to navigate around cooking this, but it's actually pretty easy in my eyes. I think what's really important is just knowing that, hey, if you're cooking, like I'm only cooking one steak, right? So I have full control of this process. But if you're cooking 7, 8, 9, 10 steaks, there's a certain way to go about cooking in bulk batches. But I think what's really important is just not overcrowding the pan, right? Don't be intimidated, just go for it. What's super important is getting those reps in. Once you learn how to cook beef or learn how to cook steak, it just becomes natural, and you learn how to do it just by repetition. We are ready to flip, so I want to check for that color. Look at that, looking good, but I want a little bit more. So at this point, we'll rotate a little bit. Now we'll go to flip. Beautiful color. Look at that. And then when you flip the steak, put it at a different part of the pan because it's super important. You want to get that nice color. But if you're searing over here, you want to flip it to over there because that part is ripping. At this point, it's super important. You want to develop a really good crust on both sides. Adding the salt beforehand and drying off the steak will let you achieve that. But I think a lot of people overcomplicate it. Take it out before you cook it. Let it sit room temp. do it, salt it overnight, cook it sous vide, reverse sear, yeah, whatever. Like, don't confuse yourself. It's a freaking steak, okay? There are so many ways to get to the finished product. And believe it or not, and I hate to sound like a but I actually prefer a light smoke on steak, and I prefer over charcoal all the time. So anyway, we're gonna get right into this. So what a lot of people miss with the bone-in filet is you wanna cook this bone part. So now that we have both sides seared, you know, it's super important to pay attention to the bone side. This side is the side, you wanna warm that bone up so that way it penetrates all the way through. And so we wanna get this bone ripping hot. Obviously our filet is still rare, but if we don't sear this bone part, what will end up is super close to the bone. It's just gonna be raw, and that's no good. And so bistecca or a porterhouse or a T-bone or a bone-in filet or a Kansas City strip, which is basically bone-in strip, you always, always, always wanna cook this bone side. Get that bone ripping, okay? Because that heat is gonna penetrate to the, okay? Now, this is the most important part here, okay? After the bone is warmed up, so we know that will carry over, take this guy out. Then, let him rest. Okay, so you might be like, Chef, what do you mean let it rest? Now, if you're in a restaurant and this is an order fire, you're gonna go straight into the oven, okay? But if you're cooking for your peeps at your house or this is for your family, this is a great way to have the steak. So basically, I have this just seared rare, okay, raw almost, and you're gonna let that rest. Because if we were to rush this right now, it's gonna freaking bleed everywhere. And we're not gonna be able to serve it at the right temperature. So listen to what I'm saying here, because this is the pro tip, and don't share this secret with anybody, but it's what a lot of chefs do. We do this where if we have a large catering or if we have, 60 people or 40 people, we pre-mark the steaks, okay? It's called a pre-sear. And what I realized when you pre-sear and then flash, or pre-sear and then go for another pre-sear is, you allow the steak to relax, and then what you can do is, the heat is even throughout, and then you re-flash, and then you cut your resting time pretty much in half. And so it's something that, I live and die by, especially if I'm cooking for like 10 to 15 people and I have, 20 steaks that I need to cook or whatever it is, 15, 10, I do the pre-sear. Now, am I saying pre-sear it in the morning when you're having breakfast and then serve it for dinner at night? No. What I'm saying is, let's say you're having dinner at 7 o'clock, I'm pre-searing at 6, right? So that way my steaks are pre-seared. I'm able to take the time to develop that nice crust. And, then at that point, I'm flashing and finishing, right? So finishing, flashing, all that good stuff. Now, I will admit, I love grilled steaks. I love charcoal. I know I mentioned that 30 times already. But, I want to make this really easy. Like, this is dummy proof. You can't F this up. And so, it's just really important to me. But the pre-sear method has proven to give you that nice, even mid-rare or rare all the way through, opposed to, like, if I were to just throw this filet in the oven, right? I could do that, but you're gonna end up with sort of a bullseye if it's a 450 degree oven, or above. And so what I strive for and what I teach cooks is you want edge to edge just like it was sous vide. So with that, you can do that with reverse sear. You can do it with sous vide. You can also do it with what I like is, I'll sear it like this, and then, I'll finish it in the smoker at 250, right? And just let it ride. So pre-sear like this, finish in the smoker. There's so many different ways to get to the same result. It really just depends on what your personal preference is. I'm gonna leave you with a couple more pro tips while the steak is resting. First things first. The stupid thumb test, oh, this is rare, this is medium, this is mid-rare, man, forget about that. Don't, anybody tells you that, tell them to go back home, okay? That doesn't make sense, and I'm gonna tell you why, okay? The New York feels different from the ribeye. The ribeye feels different from the filet. Pork feels different than beef. Lamb feels different than beef. And so when you're teaching somebody, oh yeah, touch your thumb, guess what? My hand is different than my wife's hand, right? My hand is different than Joe's hand. It's super important not to give people this misinformation. Even if you're a home cook at the house, well, chef, what do you recommend? Get a thermometer. Don't waste your time, okay, unless you are now, if you're a busy cook on a station, you don't have time to temp every meat, okay? We actually use we use a cake tester in fine dining, but for the avid home cook, or if you're at the house and you're cooking for your family and you have more than 5 steaks and you don't wanna mess them up, just get a meat thermometer, okay? Nobody's gonna be mad at you. Make it happen. Get a meat thermometer. Don't do the finger trick, okay? Makes no sense. Next, let your meat come to room temperature. Guys, this is a fib, okay? And to all my chefs out there, you know what I'm talking about. Let me give you some context. You're in a busy steakhouse, okay? Do you think for 1 second this restaurant has all of their steaks sitting out at room temperature? No, they pull from the fridge. Absolutely pull from the fridge. And guess what? There's no restaurant that I know of that leaves their steak out at room temperature. It just doesn't make sense logistically. So no, honestly, in the professional kitchen, we don't do that. Now, I will play devil's advocate here, and I know of some tasting menus in fine dining and Michelin level restaurants. And to give you an example, because I love the feedback, but you know, if I have a really lean elk loin that is, you know, super lean, wild game, you know, yes, I want to pull that out to room temp, because at room temp, 76, 80, 83 degrees, whatever it is in the kitchen, you know, to bring that to 120 or 115 takes less time. And I'm just giving it a quick sear, or let's say if I'm dropping it in, you know, confit, or if I'm cooking sous vide, then that's perfectly fine. But there's no chance on this God's green earth that I'm going to pull out, you know, whatever it is, a New York strip or a ribeye, and I'm just going to let them all hang out during service. No, absolutely not. And I would argue if you have a thinner piece of meat, you know, anything below 2 inches, you know, I would argue that you get a better crust if you pull it straight from the fridge. And so just know that in restaurants, we don't do that. I can't speak for everybody, but I know in my restaurant, my food cost is very important to me. So we don't just leave food out unless it's a tasting menu situation, or let's say it's an order in, right? So order in, then you pull the meat out of the fridge, right? But that's not like before service. That's like, okay, fire two, then you pull the meat out. Rant over, but I just wanted to, you know, clarify, because that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Searing the steak does not seal in the juices, okay? I don't know who made this up, but I was fooled too, because when I was a young cook and a young chef, I was like, yeah, searing it seals in the juices. Man, the juices are gonna leave no matter what. It doesn't matter if you sear it on all sides or whatever. Like, you'll see it. Do it. Sear it, and then let it rest. You'll see juice come out. Like, it doesn't make any sense. That's a lie. Move on with your life. Okay, super important pro tip. Yes, absolutely let the steak rest after you cook it. Let it rest. Trust me on this. You don't want to go cutting right into it after you've cooked it. It will bleed out, and you know, the juices won't maintain inside the piece of meat. The last thing that I want to say is salting your steak overnight via osmosis. You know, in all honesty, I've done this a couple times, and you know, I don't mind it. I think it's a good idea, but also, like, you know, I don't know if it's worth the effort if you have a large party, right? If you have 1 or 2 steaks and you're doing it for your family, it's cool. But just know that there is a high chance that you might get a gray band around the outside if you use too much salt. So you know, it's one of those things. In the restaurant, we call it dry brining, which you know, via osmosis, you know, it'll pull water out. But I hate to say this, I've done that in like 15 minutes, 10 minutes. So like a good example of what I just did, I mean, that's a prime example of, like, you know, yeah, salt it. Don't cook it yet, but it's like the start of your mise en place. So that's just one other thing, but let's get back into the video. Let's say we're 15 minutes out. It's time for the family to eat, okay? Now you have 2 options. I'm gonna go with option A. Option A is to give it a re-sear and then flash in the oven, right? Because I wanna add butter to this. Or you can just go straight into the oven and then slice after it rests for a couple minutes. But we're gonna do option A because I wanna develop as much flavor as possible. We go back in. I'm gonna start on the top here. So same pan, all I did was just give it a little wipe out, nothing crazy. But what you're gonna notice is the steak is much softer. It's not as tight from being in the fridge. Super important, no reason to go mess with it, okay? We're just gonna leave it as is. Let it cook. Let him cook. Let him cook. Okay, I'm switching to tongs. So now you'll notice we got definitely a better brown, okay? And then at this point, this is when I'm gonna add butter. Now, you don't wanna add too much butter at once. You wanna add one pat of butter, let it melt a little bit, then you add your other pad. What we don't wanna do is we don't wanna burn the butter, but we want to start creating that Maillard and really get that nutty flavor from the brown butter. Now, garlic, okay, always smash the clove, okay, then add it to the pan. Now you can also go with thyme and rosemary, but I don't have it and I didn't want to just buy it for this video. But thyme, rosemary works. You know, pretty much at this point it's like, okay, now it's go time. I've seen a lot of chefs, and I've done this before, where I add, you know, I'll add onions or, you know, any aromatic shallots, okay? And then from here, if you want a butter baste, make sure the butter is foamy, okay? And as you can see, this butter is starting to burn a little bit. So what I want to do is add another chunk of butter. That's going to help bring down the temperature and really get this butter foamy, okay? So it's super important. Master your heat, okay? Now, another pro tip is if your butter is about to burn all the way, don't freak out. Just, let's say the butter's burning, just add oil. And what that does is it brings up the smoke temp, so you will never burn your butter, okay? So it's super important. Once the aromatics start to cook, I always put them on top of the steak, okay, just like that, and then I baste. So again, pro tip, if your butter's burning and you can't control it, or you ran out of butter or whatever the thing is, don't let it burn all the way. Go ahead and add oil to the pan, and that will save you, okay? It will save you, I promise you. Because the oil will bring up the smoke temp of the butter, and then you won't burn it. Okay, so bone-in filet. Let's look at this side. Look at that. Look at that, guys. That is freaking amazing. Now, we don't want to overcook this, right? But always the bone side. So what's really important is I'm going to let this cook here. And then listen, turn the heat down. Turn the heat down a little bit. Beautiful. Look at that. So now we let it rest. Beautiful. Look at that foamy butter. See that foamy butter? Yeah. Oh yeah, we like that. Look at that, man. Told my chefs out there, this one's for you. Look at that. Beautiful. So obviously, if it was a little bit thicker, then you would finish it in the oven or you finish it on the grill. This steak I did 100% in the pan because it's not thick enough. Let me show you what I like to do, and this is what I teach. If you don't have a thermometer, oh my God, thermometers are too expensive. Listen, go get yourself a $2 cake tester. Type in on Amazon, cake tester. You can get a pack of 3 for $5, okay? It's worth it. I'm gonna show you a pro tip. Right here, you insert in, okay? And then what you wanna do is, back in the day, this is how we tested stuff without thermometers, okay? What I like to do. Now, this steak is for me. If I was in a restaurant, I would sanitize it, okay? Just, future reference, okay? I'm not in the restaurant right now. This steak is gonna be for me. If it's ice cold, it's raw. If it's warm, it's rare. If it's a little bit more than warm, like baby bottle temp, which is what I call it, then it's cooked perfectly, mid-rare. If it's hot, if the metal is hot, then it's overcooked. It's medium or mid-well, or if that's what the guests want. So we're gonna let this rest for about 5 minutes and then we'll slice it. The steak is rested and I can't wait to slice into it, but if you notice, I'm gonna follow the bone all the way down. Okay, I might get a little bit more bone than I want here. But what we wanna do is just cut off the bone. Now, if you notice, beautiful, nice and how I like it. When it goes to cutting filet, there's no really rhyme or reason. It's so tender, it doesn't even matter. What I like to do is just cut straight down. My mouth is watering looking at this steak right now. And what I like to do is I like to take that last piece and I'll tuck it on the other side. And that way you get beautiful pieces. Okay, that goes on the plate like that. The little chain piece goes right there. And now for the beautiful bone-in filet. There's no blood on the plate. You see that? Very important, no blood leaking out everywhere because we let the steak rest. Now with the bone-in filet, I'm just gonna take a little of that brown butter because I want it. And filet is very lean. And then also, I'm a charcoal fiend, so we're gonna use a little bit of smoked salt here. So shout out Osmo for the smoked salt. We love you. But smoked salt there, and then I'm gonna go cracked black pepper right now. You can serve this with demi-glaze, border glaze, whatever you want. I mean, look at that. You can't beat that, okay? It's beautiful. Perfect. Oh, yeah. And this is dry-aged beef, too. Sorry for the chewing. This is excellent. Listen, I'm not going to lie. Contrary to popular belief, as a chef, I don't like filet. Truly. I would rather prefer ribeye. Believe it or not, there's so many other cuts that I like. Hanger steak is probably my favorite on the animal. Filet, I just think is overrated. Don't let me take all the hype out of this video. So if you love filet, I'm sorry, but here's your piece. Psych. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I hope this brought value to you from a chef's perspective. If it did, please leave a like, please subscribe. Share this with somebody that you think needs to know it. I hope it becomes the most viral video on the internet on how to cook a steak. Thanks a lot, guys. See ya.